Throughout history, elites have used money and debt as hidden levers of control. From primitive barter in early coinage to sophisticated banking systems, monetary structures have historically been engineered to benefit a small ruling class. 30th century BC, ancient Mesopotamia. Sumerian temples functioned as proto-banks, storing grain and precious metals, recording debt on clay tablets. Farmers who couldn't repay loans of seed or silver, often falling into bondage. Yet, even ancient rulers understood that unchecked debt could undermine their rule. 18th century BC, Babylonian king Hammurabi's code mandated the cancellation of certain debts in times of crisis.
There's very little antique furniture here now, and most of what is dates from 1902.
Not born of altruism, but of pragmatism. Wiping out personal debts was seen as necessary to preserve social order. If a small creditor class amassed all wealth and peasants lost their land or freedom, who would labor and pay taxes? By forgiving debt, as in the Babylonian Amagi, literally meaning return to the mother, or the biblical Jubilee, ancient elites implicitly acknowledged that the monetary system was structured in their favor. Ancient Egypt. For most of its long history, there was no coined money. Instead, grain and other commodities served as currency in a highly centralized and so-called command economy. This meant the state literally held the population's food supply and livelihood in its hands. Such control over money in kind, the Deben unit of grain or copper, allowed the Egyptian elite to direct large projects, pyramids, and temples, and to buffer society against famine, thereby securing their legitimacy. At the same time, ensured the populace remained dependent. This centralized control maintained a rigid social hierarchy, with the pharaohs and temple priests at the top. Classical antiquity, Greece and Rome. 6th century BC Athens. When debtors defaulted, they were forced into slavery, threatening to turn a large portion of citizens into property, leading to social crisis. The statesman Solon recognized that money had been weaponized by the wealthy and instituted the Syzygia, shaking off of burdens, a landmark reform that outlawed debt slavery and canceled agrarian debts. 5th century BC, Rome's first code, the 12 Tables, capped interest rates at 8% per year. Previously, usury had been essentially unlimited. The historian Tacitus observed, carried on according to the desire of the rich. Despite legal limits, debt crisis persisted. At times, desperate debtors sold their children into slavery. Such abuses, often by senators and knights, eventually led to the law, or lex Poetilia Papiria, named after families including aristocrats and commoners, which abolished debt bondage. 3rd century BC. The denarius, Rome's silver coin, became a trusted medium of exchange across the Mediterranean. Over centuries, the Roman government repeatedly debased its coinage, reducing the precious metal content to stretch the budget for legions and public works. This amounted to a stealth tax on anyone holding money. By the 3rd century Common Era, the silver content of the denarius had plummeted to a tiny fraction of its original, causing rampant inflation. Notably, this policy favored the elite. By the late Empire, commoners and soldiers were paid in debased silver coins. By the time Western Roman Empire fell, 5th century Common Era, the concentration of wealth and heavy taxation had hollowed out the middle classes.
Very independent. They have always done each one. Just
High
exactly
Middle
what they
Ages, 12th and 13th centuries, trade revival. The Knights Templar, a crusading order, had evolved into a proto-international bank, operating a network across Europe and the Holy Land. King Philip IV of France borrowed heavily from both Jews and the Templars, whose vast treasure and land holdings made them one of Europe's most powerful financial institutions. Then, early 14th century, Philip expelled all Jews from France, canceling his debts and confiscated their property. The next year, he arrested the Templar Knights en masse and seized their assets. Under the guise of righteousness and national interest, Philip effectively wielded the machinery of state to wipe out his creditors, consolidating wealth and power back into royal hands. Meanwhile, in Italy, the Medici Bank became the largest in Europe in the 15th century. Cosimo Medici and the Medici family became de facto rulers of the Florentine Republic, producing 4 popes, all while officially just private citizens, blurring financial and political power in the Renaissance. Others followed. Jakob Fugger and the Fugger family of Augsburg, Bavaria, Germany, amassed enormous wealth through banking and trade, especially in silver and copper. The Fuggers bankrolled the Habsburgs, including Emperor Maximilian I and his grandson, helping Charles V to become Holy Roman Emperor. This was a new paradigm. Rather than monarchs simply seizing wealth, savvy financiers became the king-makers. By the late Middle Ages, central banking in rudimentary form appeared. In city-states like Venice and Genoa, issuing government bonds and establishing state banks. Early 17th century, the city of Amsterdam created the Bank of Amsterdam to stabilize commerce by acting as central repository and clearinghouse for bills of exchange. Public finance was becoming institutionalized, which often meant a partnership between governments and wealthy financiers. 17th to 19th centuries, early modern era, saw an unprecedented nexus of money and power. Central banks, national debts, and powerful private banking dynasties. A group of wealthy investors, led by William Patterson, made a deal with the English crown. They would lend £1.2 million to the government, and in return, they'd receive an exclusive charter to set up the Bank of England and issue notes. Through wars, 18th century, British national debt skyrocketed, with interest payments flowing steadily to bondholders, spurring others. The Banque de France, or earlier attempts, like Sweden's Riksbank. The House of Rothschild, a Jewish banking family from Frankfurt, Germany, established an international network of banks in London, Paris, Frankfurt, Vienna, and Naples. Records show the Rothschilds funded both sides in the Napoleonic conflict, lending to rival governments, and by war's end amassed incredible wealth, peering above kings, rising higher than emperors, and holding a whole continent in the hollow of their hands. Not a cabinet moves without their advice. The Rothschilds and similar financiers didn't rule territories. Their money governed behind the scenes. They could stabilize the government by extending credit or provoke prices by withholding it.
No. 'Cause
Later
she's
in
still
the
there.
19th century,
But someday
writers
she's
like
gonna be
J.A.
free.
Hobson and others critiqued that no great
She's
war
in the
could be
papers all the
undertaken
time. That would
without the
affect the middle
approval
class
of these
community.
finance
They'll just
houses,
get
implying
so
a
anxious.
cosmopolitan
We always
financial
wanted the
elite
same, but
had
it's
gained
hard
veto
because
power
they
over
want
nations. Through the 19th century, other financial titans
Yes, I
also
will.
emerged.
She
The
must do
Barings
all the
in
normal
Britain,
things she do now.
Morgans in the United
I rather
States,
hold my breath and
but the
nothing
pattern
say.
remained. Those who controlled the money held quiet sway over nominally more powerful kings and politicians.
Of course,
By
I
the
do
end
have
of
the
the
official
19th
role as
century,
wife of the
many
president.
Western governments
And I
had a
think
permanent
every
national
state
debt held
should
by
do
a relatively
something in
small
its
group
position
of
to help
wealthy
things
investors.
back. I would hope that when I leave here, I will
20th century, monetary systems become truly global and fully centralized.
walk
The design of the U.S. Federal Reserve, created in 1913, was heavily influenced by bankers. In fact, the blueprint for the Fed was drawn up at a secret meeting of financiers and officials on Jekyll Island, Georgia, in 1910. A meeting so secret that for decades, the handful of participants, including J.P. Morgan's top lieutenant and Senator Nelson Aldrich,
anything to do with
did not admit it even happened. This meeting, cloaked as a duck hunting trip, highlights how an elite syndicate can literally create new money behind closed doors.
I suppose she can.
Similar central banks spread worldwide, and global monetary conferences like Bretton Woods in 1944 set the rules for international finance, making the U.S. dollar the linchpin of the post-World War II order. Under the Bretton Woods system, institutions like the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and World Bank were founded to manage global monetary stability and development loans. While their goals were noble on paper, critics argue these institutions became instruments of Western financial interests. Their policies that favor opening markets to foreign investors, privatizing state industries, and prioritizing debt benefit multinational corporations and banks, largely based in wealthy countries. For example, Oxfam reported in 2024 that 80% of the global population lives in the global south, yet they own only 30% of global wealth, reflecting how financial globalization has left developing nations at a stark disadvantage. On the flip side, the richest 1% now have more wealth than the bottom 95% of humanity combined. It's argued such extreme concentration of wealth is not an accident of free markets, but a result of rules set by the affluent to favor capital over labor. Billionaires today wield enormous influence. Over 1/3 of the biggest 50 global corporations are controlled by just a single billionaire or family. In other words, the global financial system, deregulated capital flows, offshore banking, debt-driven economies often operate to the advantage of the same elite class that has historically benefited from monetary control. Even within developed countries, central banks have been criticized for favoring wealthy asset owners by boosting stock and property values. Governments, too, sometimes use inflation to erode debts, hurting ordinary savers. Time and again, we see echoes of the past. The cost of financial crises are socialized, borne by the masses, while the benefits of booms and bailouts are privatized, reaped by the elite. Across 5 millennia of recorded history, money has continuously served as a mechanism of control for those who design and dominate it.
sense of obligation for the others.
The historical evolution of money, barter to coins, coins to paper, paper to digital credit, has continually shifted power towards those who manage it.
A challenge and
Though history also reveals some resistance and reform, the concentration of money power has accelerated in the modern era. While money itself is a neutral tool, how it is governed is not.
He has to
With few checks,
He used to say the
money
campaign, never
tends
mind,
to
never
enrich a minority.
And sometimes you feel that way when you're so busy.
Understanding
You
this
think,
history
I've got
is
to
vital,
just kind
as
of
it
stop
highlights the
and
importance
see where I
of
am,
transparency
what I'm doing,
and equity
who I
in
am.
monetary policy.
Um,
The adage, follow the money, remains as relevant as ever. To understand power in any era, one must understand who controls the money and how they do it.
I'm a man. Well, nobody's perfect.